Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast.
Hey guys, how's it going? We are on our 32nd episode today. How's it going, Danny?
Dude, it is excellent. I just put in a really hard week of work back in Medellin after doing a little bit of travel, and excited to kind of talk a little bit more about some good food and some good cooking.
Yeah, I think today will be a very interesting topic. I have to say, reading about this, and Danny, you took the lead on this. This is a very, very technical but important topic. So the ball is in your court, man. You're going to have to make this as easy to understand as possible, because I think there's some great takeaways.
Excellent. Yeah, today we're going to focus on turmeric, an herb and a rhizome that's grown in South Asia and Southeast Asia that's kind of taken off in the last few years. People have learned that although there isn't a ton of clinical research saying that turmeric reduces rates of X by Y, that actually turmeric has just been shown, generally speaking, to be extraordinarily healthy. And I've started to incorporate it into my diet probably 6 or 7 months ago. And I'm pretty kind of averse to incorporating new things into my diet regularly, simply because I like making habits out of things. So if I'm incorporating 5 or 10 foods at once into my diet, it's not going to have long staying power. But turmeric is one of the foods that I decided to really kind of be bullish on. So I've made it a goal to learn about it, and also for Matt and I to share some facts about it and evaluate it from a business perspective as well.
Yeah, and even reading the research right now in the 20 minutes leading up to the podcast, when we started discussing this, I realized that I had not been taking full advantage of the ingredient. And I actually just put something on right now using the oil and pepper and ginger to maximize the bioavailability of the compound. But we're going to get into that later. So Danny, we've talked about shooting videos.
Yeah, and that's one thing we wanted to kind of get your guys' take on and grow out in the Food Startups Podcast is shooting high-quality videos, interviews of folks who are visiting at different companies in the food startups world, but also do a fair bit of kind of cooking and start looking at superfoods more of how do we utilize them in our diet. That's something I've wanted to do for a long time, Matt.
Yeah. I think assimilating the superfoods into your diet is key. And sometimes you find these recipes and they tell you to add X superfood with 5 other superfoods into a smoothie, which may cost you, I don't know, like $100 just to get all these ingredients to make one smoothie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I was also and explosive diarrhea too, if you don't know what you're mixing.
Right. All this stuff can happen. And so I think that's going to be a really cool new channel for the podcast. Another thing that we've been talking about that someone approached us about, but we are at least 5 months away from this, but we'd like to organize some trips to Colombia, maybe some tours of coffee farms or cacao plantations or other superfoods that grow in the Andean region.
Absolutely. I think it's very valuable being able to live here. You learn what goes on. And I think Matt and I are in a unique opportunity to demystify a lot of the myths around coffee farm plantations and who's doing it and all the foreigners coming down to Colombia and buying up land and all this sort of thing. Because we're actually kind of seeing what happens. And it's a pretty interesting picture, and we want to kind of share it with you guys and also, I think, educate folks on coffee. Coffee seems to be a rising passion or a rising hobby for both Matt and I. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun, too.
Excellent. Yeah. And maybe we can get the historian of coffee, Robert Thurston, a former guest, to come with us.
Yeah, man, that would be such a treat, because when it comes down to visiting coffee farms, you really also want to be able to know, well, what is quality coffee and what is not quality coffee? All these processes look beautiful, but what does it actually mean?
Right. Because sometimes you'll see the coffee tour, and it might be more about the process and the experience of making coffee, but maybe it won't be so focused on how to get the highest quality coffee.
Exactly. And I think, Matt, one thing we've both seen in Bogota and Medellin in the past year to 2 years is that the quality of coffee, the popularity of specialty coffee has gone through the roof. Whereas until about 2 years ago, a lot of Colombian coffee, the best Colombian coffee was always labeled for export. And what we've mentioned before is that Colombian coffee drank domestically was always the tinto, the ground coffee in a bag that you put in a cup and you mix it with hot water. It doesn't have any special properties for taste. And so I want to make sure that we provide you guys with something quality where you can learn the differences in taste and aromas and maturities. Make it something that's more special than just a random, I guess I hesitate to say it, but more special than a random coffee tour that a hostel in Medellin offers, because there are plenty of those.
Right on. Yeah. And some of that coffee, I mean, the chemicals and just the low control of quality and sanitation, that can really cause you some inflammation. Speaking of inflammation, turmeric is anti-inflammatory. Turmeric, for those who don't know, turmeric is part of curry powder. When you get the Indian style food, it's in a lot of different spices or spice blends that go into Indian food. And turmeric, if used correctly, can be as strong as an anti-inflammatory drug. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's super fascinating. So turmeric is this kind of, usually see it in powder form, and it's this rhizome, as I mentioned. So you really want to get it fresh. And it's actually really strong as an anti-inflammatory. So folks have arthritis and osteoarthritis. If your joints are hurting, it can really, really help. Now, people say that it's not all great in the sense that inflammation isn't the worst thing in the world. Inflammation is a immune response to pain. And so the thing is, sometimes that pain can be bad in it, and sometimes that inflammation can be bad in itself if it's chronic, if it's a chronic problem. And so curcumin, which is the active compound in turmeric, and it's what gives turmeric its yellow color, it's a very, very strong anti-inflammatory. Fascinating to kind of hear that, because interesting to hear for me, because I know that arthritis actually runs in my family, and I have a lot of family back in Poland, and my grandmother, she suffers a lot from arthritis, so it's something I've been giving her as a recommendation recently.
Great. Well, so turmeric, it's an anti-inflammatory. It also has strong antioxidant qualities.
Yeah. Now, this is something that's really interesting. You always want to kind of hesitate to say turmeric can do this or turmeric can do that. So before we kind of delve any deeper, we do want to say that, first of all, we're not giving people medical advice when we're talking about turmeric, because turmeric has had a lot of hype, but clinical studies are not widely available for turmeric. Now, the reason is a good reason. The reason is that turmeric isn't patentable. So nobody is going to spend $1 billion to figure out that turmeric reduces cancer rates by a certain percentage. But we do know that that curcumin itself is a polyphenol. It's an antioxidant that actually helps to kind of neutralize or block these bad components that can accumulate throughout the body called free radicals. And free radicals are these dangerous molecules that, because of the fact that they lack an electron, they're super energetic and they can cause damage, can bump into and kind of harm cell membranes. And generally speaking, they're to be avoided, especially actually in the brain, where they can lead to neurodegenerative diseases. And so curcumin, it's a compound that actually minimizes the effect of free radicals and also excites the body to produce other antioxidants. And this is super interesting to kind of hear about, that curcumin actually has this power. And again, I just say, a lot of folks talk about antioxidants these days as if they're found everywhere in every single food, from wine, tea, chocolate, goji berries, everything. So I don't want to kind of say that, curcumin has tons of antioxidants, eat all of it that you can. But it's definitely worth mentioning that it has high antioxidants, and as a result, it's been linked to lower cancer rates. So, Matt, I think that that's something that's really interesting to me. Once again, just from my family, I know I have some pretty bad genes for cancer. And so when my brother once told me, listen, my brother's a few years older than me. He said, listen, I'm getting pretty worried that I have about a 40% chance of contracting cancer or of having cancer in my lifetime. And so this is something where if you're able to find high quality turmeric, and we'll get into that a little bit later, it's something that might not be bad for you. We don't know how good it is for us, but actually turmeric does not have really, really high side effects when you consume it.
Yeah, and I don't really understand the legal stuff behind it, but I'm just going to point out now, and this is also on the website, legal disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes only. We are not doctors.
Definitely. So Matt and I are talking about, there's been some research about Alzheimer's disease.
That's right. And as you know, Alzheimer's disease, actually, since we're talking about family health, my grandma had Alzheimer's disease and she passed away from it. And so it's definitely in my blood as well. So Danny, there is a connection between prevention of Alzheimer's and turmeric?
Yeah, and that's pretty interesting too, is that when we look at how turmeric works and how curcumin can cross the blood-brain barrier, it kind of makes sense that it might have an effect on neurodegenerative diseases and on free radicals. Dementia has been linked to the accumulation of free radicals. And a lot of different compounds cannot enter the brain and have an effect on the brain simply because of the fact that the brain wants to maintain this environment. It wants to maintain an environment that are free from dangerous things. And so there is this kind of like, let's go back to biology class, there's this phospholipid bilayer, which basically prevents different compounds from crossing through it. A lot of the times where, if you ever learned about drugs that cross the blood-brain barrier, they do so in a specific way. And curcumin uses those same pathways. And it's interesting that as a result, we find that there's this community, there's a study that shows that folks in an Indian community had some of the lowest rates of Alzheimer's in the world, and Indian culture has high usage of turmeric in its diet. Turmeric is the yellow stuff that makes yellow curry. So I think that's fascinating.
Now, turmeric contains curcumin, and Danny, I think this is important to define for the listeners that curcumin is an active ingredient in turmeric. We've been talking about turmeric this whole time, but turmeric only has about 3% content of curcumin by weight.
Well, that's really interesting. And it might be my lack of medical experience, but I do know that back in the day, when I was first getting interested in food, I became quite familiar with a root plant called kava. Kava is actually grown in tropical regions in Polynesia. It's made its way over to Hawaii and become a little bit more popular in the United States the past few years. And what was fascinating that I learned about kava was that kava was composed of a bunch of different compounds, active ingredients that also penetrated the blood-brain barrier. And when you were able to separate those different compounds, I think there were 17 or so different kavaloids. And don't quote me on that. But when you were able to separate them, you found that each of them, if they were ingested separately, they would have a certain effect. But the effect of ingesting kava totally had a higher effect than ingesting individually. In other words, there was a synergy there. And so turmeric has curcumin and also has several other curcuminoids. Okay, and so I would say that a lot of folks these days, myself included, we kind of tend to look at, well, what's natural might make sense to be good for you simply because of the fact that there is no synthesized process around it. But when you extract something, there might be some loss. So unless I was really particular about my source of curcumin, unless I knew where it was coming from and understood the manufacturing processes behind it, I would probably just defer towards turmeric and maybe fresh turmeric. So I think that's pretty interesting. And when we'll touch on that a little bit more at the very end of the show when we just talk about where turmeric can be found and some of the business opportunities there.
Right on. Okay. So let's see. Now, we've talked about Alzheimer's. We've talked about anti-inflammatory. What about consumption?
Gotcha. Okay. So interesting around consumption, turmeric does not have high side effects compared to the anti-inflammatory drugs that you might take instead of taking turmeric to treat arthritis. Turmeric does not have high levels of drowsiness or anything like that. But at the same time, there is a level of liver toxicity, which you find in many, many compounds. That if you just take turmeric 5 tablespoons a day, an amount that's very, very high, you will find decreasing liver function. It's found in a lot of different plants. And so I would say that it's important to be aware of it. And it's important to understand that everything in moderation. That'll come up when we kind of talk about our next topic, which is how we consume turmeric. So, Matt, I started to kind of consume turmeric and incorporate it into my diet around 6 months ago. And I know you've been taking some steps too, right?
I used to make a lot of chicken curry, and to be honest, I bought some turmeric earlier this year, and I haven't had it so much this year. What got me back into it was when we were in Medellin last week, and Kata was making that granola where she baked the oats with turmeric on it. But my main awareness of it is from my Indian friends that I know and just eating dinners, delicious spicy dinners at their house, and just cooking chicken curry.
Absolutely. And so turmeric is really, really common in Indian food, and it's a very relied upon herb in Ayurvedic medicine. And my girlfriend Catalina actually has started to incorporate it big time into her diet, in addition to ginger. And Ayurveda is something I don't know a great deal about, so I won't get into it too much. But I know it's something that generally it's good for digestion, it's good for balance, and that's why it's cited in Ayurveda, which to my understanding, the philosophy is a lot about keeping your body in balance. And so I think that Indian culture and Indian food culture really relies heavily on it. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to kind of take a little bit of that Indian culture of food and turmeric in it and try to kind of incorporate it into my own recipes at home. But I will say that I don't know if I've done it correctly until actually really researching it. Anyway, so one thing that is kind of easy to overlook with turmeric is that you have to consume it in a certain way to maximize its benefits and its absorption in the body. Right, Matt?
Yes, Danny, you are 100% right about that. To fully take advantage of the bioavailability of turmeric, you can use such things as black peppercorns or oils or ginger to increase their bioavailability and get more of the curcumin compound. And I just heated up some liquid premium coconut oil, which is basically coconut oil without the long chain triglycerides. So it always stays liquid. So it's like a super healthy, even healthier than coconut oil, with ginger and turmeric. And I let it cook, and I cooked some arepas, and it was excellent.
That's cool. That's awesome. What Matt was saying about that, like the digestion or the bioavailability of turmeric is absolutely right. Just that there are certain compounds, black pepper being one of them, and ginger being another, and oils as well, that help with how curcumin and turmeric overall is digested. You run the risk if you just take a teaspoon of turmeric to the face of not being able to really digest it. Your stomach just needs to be ready for it, because otherwise what's going to happen is that your stomach's going to metabolize it without any actual absorption of the curcumin. So the three things that you want to listen to when you're talking about eating turmeric are mixing it with pepper, black pepper, or ginger, or oil, or a combination of the three. Okay, and so I know Matt likes to keep it Colombian style with arepas, and I definitely can't disrespect that because I have a long-standing appreciation for arepas, and I understand that some people don't like them, and I've grown to really like them. But I also like to take turmeric with tea and with coconut oil as well. So you can actually mix a teaspoon of turmeric with 3 cups or 4 cups of water, and then add black pepper and add some other spices and kind of make a tea out of it. And then you can add coconut oil or coconut milk, something that has a healthy fat. And that's going to be something that actually helps increase the bioavailability. That's actually going to be pretty good in the morning or the evening. And yeah, Matt, I'm just going to run through a few other creative ways I've looked at consuming turmeric, some mistakes that I've made, and then we'll kind of head over to the business part of this. So really quickly, I've just involved turmeric in curries and chicken fillets, where I'll try to just mix turmeric with honey and salt and pepper and just saute or braise some chicken fillets with it. And I'll put a healthy amount of turmeric on there, especially because honey helps to cut kind of the earthy taste of turmeric really well. And then sometimes I like to put turmeric on my eggs, because in the morning trying to eat something light, I'm going to have some salt and peppered eggs, and the eggs are high in fats, cholesterol. So I'm also going to include turmeric there. Okay, so lots to think about, a lot of different recipes, from your teas to your arepas, to your chicken, to your curries, to even your eggs. But the mainstay is include pepper and include oils in there. Now, the last thing we want to talk about, last portion of this episode, is the food startup side.
Danny, of course, our listeners today, they didn't come for a cooking show. They're trying to make some money.
Yeah, that's right. And keeping it holistic, a little bit of making money, a little bit of eating right is all within reason in one episode. But one thing we want to talk about are just a few of the potential opportunities in the turmeric market. And one of them I'll talk about is a company called Turmeric Alive, which is based in New York City. And it's a juice startup that basically creates turmeric elixirs, drinks that are based in turmeric with other vegetables, herbs, and spices, oils as well. They have a drink that has coconut oil and has different spices, including pepper, all ready for you to drink and consume up. And it's been pretty popular in different circles that really focus on Ayurveda, yoga, holistic living, because they do it for you. You don't have to prepare this turmeric. Turmeric stains things, so you don't want to make a mess in the kitchen sometimes. And it looks like it's a pretty good opportunity.
Yeah, and this is definitely a high-end product. Really nice looking website. I see they use honey as their sweetener. They have a matcha tea. Now, Danny, correct me if I'm wrong here, but turmeric is very cheap, but it just shows you that even though it may be in the world at $1.20 per kilo, there are options to make quality premium products out of it.
Well, absolutely. And just because something is, I crunched some numbers and I saw that turmeric isn't really super expensive in India. And it's about $1.20 to $1.50 a kilogram for turmeric. That's reasonably cheap. If you look at commodity prices. And if you look at the fact that actual serving sizes of turmeric can be quite small in proportion to a kilogram, where you're not going to go through a kilogram of turmeric in a year. But just because it's cheap doesn't mean that it's not worth a great deal biologically. And so if you're looking at the health properties, and if you believe the health properties, and if you utilize turmeric on a regular basis, then you might be well off in understanding that it's not something that's a $20 a pound goji berry that has antioxidants, but the source is questionable. This is something that it's been a staple in the Indian diet for a long time. And as a result of that, and as a result of how it's grown, it's not super, super expensive. But at the same time, maybe some of the best turmeric is. And we look at niche industries and niche products a lot. And so Matt and I were talking about one particular company that is introducing kind of like a premium turmeric to the market.
Yeah, so there is a company on the big island of Hawaii, and they have ginger, kava, like Danny talked about earlier, and turmeric. And their turmeric is organic, grown in Hawaii, and it goes for $60 for a pound, which is about almost 90 to 100 times more expensive than $1.20 a kilo.
Yeah, and 1 pound of turmeric for $60 is a premium price. But at the same time, they make some health claims, and Hawaii has made a lot of claims about its food over time simply because it's this lush tropical island that's in the United States. So it has an easier time growing food for the U.S. market without having to deal with a lot of import regulations. And it also has this lush climate that's very diverse. So we have Kona coffee coming from Kona in Hawaii. And then we also have kava that's kind of created a reputation for itself the past few years. And now turmeric. Now turmeric for $60 a pound might be a little bit expensive, but the thing is that it has been grown in Hawaii for many, many generations, as well as in India. And the turmeric that's advertised by this company called Inner Creek Organics say that they have 3 times the amount of curcumin compared to normal turmeric. It comes in a different color almost, because the greater amounts of curcumin are present in this type of turmeric. So fascinating because of the fact that this appeals to folks. I think that this pedigree for turmeric, that it's grown in the United States, that's grown on this island in Hawaii, it appeals to folks. And the fact that they can get it very fresh, it makes people think that, hey, well, listen, if this is important to my health, I'm willing to pay for the very best. And if that very best is in Hawaii, then so be it. And if it's for $60 a pound, then so be it too.
Yeah, and that's interesting because We had talked about the Hawaiian specialty coffee, how it's always very, very expensive. And Hawaii just has that cool tropical image. But yeah, there's no doubt about it, Danny, that there exist these very high-end niches. And so you can enter with a very high-priced product for something that is traditionally very, very inexpensive in India.
Absolutely. And one thing that comes up or that you'll immediately think about is the fact that, labor prices in Hawaii are very high compared to labor prices in India. And that's without a doubt true. But if folks in Hawaii are tapped into the consumer markets in the United States, they know that good manufacturing practices, that high quality and certified organic crops are going to command this premium, then they might have a business out of it. And that's pretty cool to think about, that you're going from the commodity to the specialized market, and it's because it's fresh and it's organic, and because of the fact that this type of thing is more popular and growing in the United States of America.
Danny, you touched on the recipes, but we'll have all these links on our website, and you can see that turmeric, once you get used to the color, I'm not very picky with food, but for someone who's very picky with food, it's going to change the color of your food. That's probably the biggest thing you'll notice. And it is going to affect the taste a little bit. But once you get used to those two things, it's something that seems could be a very, very healthy and inexpensive addition to your diet.
Absolutely. I'm super, super happy that I've made it one of the two big additions to my diet. And maybe in another episode, we'll talk about the other one. But I'm super happy that I've been able to kind of consume more turmeric over the past 6 to 8 months, learn about it and learn how to consume it correctly, and also learn about these high qualities of turmeric. Because as Matt and I have talked about a lot before, when you look at different crops and when you look at different spices and also when you look at different drug supplements and vitamins, what you'll find is that their name is going to constantly be the same, but the quality is going to be very different. It's going to be scattered across the board. And that is especially true for bioavailability and the retention of nutrients. It all depends on actually what goes on in the processing plant, not just what the labels say.
Right on. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for listening. And please let us know how you felt about this episode, if you have any questions or comments, and what ideas you have for videos and conferences and meetups in the future.
Absolutely. And it would definitely be appreciated if you can put up a rating on iTunes. Give us a little more motivation to keep on bringing you guys high quality content down here in South America. Thanks a lot.
And as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.